All right, everyone, let's get started. I think most of us are here. Work session tonight, we're going to do a brief presentation from folks at CCDC. We've got Doug Woodruff and Megan Conrad from Elam and Burke, just to discuss an upcoming Urban Renewal District amendment that will be before you all in October. And then we will go over the agenda after that is finished. So Doug, Megan, if you want to take it away, stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Saline. Good evening, commissioners. Nice to see you virtually here. Megan Conrad is with us as well. Elam Burke, she's legal counsel on this project with CCDC. So her and I will be co-presenting some slides. I'll take a moment here and share my screen so you can see the presentation. Okay, is the presentation up on the screen? Okay, great. So thanks again, Saline. We are here to talk about the First Amendment to the Urban Renewal Plan, Westside Downtown Urban Renewal Project. If that's not a mouthful, we'll try again on the next one, I suppose. But basically what this is about is it's the First Amendment to the Westside District Urban Renewal Plan. And what we're dealing with in this amendment is a small boundary adjustment. Essentially, it's about a 14-acre expansion to the Westside District. Currently, the Westside District's about 144 acres. This amendment would take it to 157 total acres. The map that you see here on the screen, the green area is the expansion area that we'll be talking about tonight. This all started about a year ago when conversations with the Boise School District, the YMCA, and some other property owners in the area exposed to CCDC that there were some opportunities just outside of the Westside District for us to potentially assist in making some public infrastructure improvements that would not only benefit the expansion area, but also the existing Westside District. So that's kind of what started out this process of examining the amendment. We included outreach from the very beginning on this, talking to the property owners. And through that outreach process, feel like we've put together an amendment that represents not only the correct paperwork for the agency, but also really represents what the folks in this area would like to see. About a year ago, we took the first formal step in this amendment when City Council approved and adopted the eligibility study, which essentially determined that this expansion area is in fact eligible to receive urban renewal assistance. Once that was approved, we embarked on a financial feasibility study or an economic feasibility study, which we've been working on this year. And I'll share a little bit more on that. And then recently, in September, the CCDC board approved this plan amendment, which included the economic feasibility study. So here we are today with this plan amendment to talk to you more about it and inform you. So coming up in October, you can consider it formally. So what we have here is a closer look at what the expansion area includes. There's what we were calling two nodes. The west node includes the YMCA block, where the existing YMCA facility is located, as well as most of the historic Boise High School campus. The eastern node includes the historic Carnegie Library, as well as the vacant bake building on the corner of 8th and State Street. It also includes a large portion of the West Franklin Street right-of-way on the north end of the West Node expansion area, as well as 2 blocks of the 8th Street right-of-way. So getting into a bit about the proposed projects that are included in this amendment. The conversations that we had with ACHD as well as Boise High School really focused in on the Boise High School campus and the potential of bringing the 11th Street Bikeway through that campus. So this amendment will allow CCDC the ability to participate in that project as we move ahead. It also gives us the ability to assist Boise High School campus with associated parking lot improvements, whether that be on campus or along Franklin Street. So those are a couple of the project types that are included as well. And the other thing that this amendment opens up for CCDC to do is to potentially participate in redevelopment efforts if there are any associated with the YMCA block in the coming years. In the East Node, the Carnegie Library, as you may know, is currently under renovations, and it would allow us to participate in the public infrastructure costs that are associated with that. There's some overhead power lines that would benefit from being undergrounded, as well as some streetscape improvements that would improve that area. And additionally, the 8th Street, what would we call it? The contraflow bike lane that we see through the 2 blocks of Restaurant Row on 8th Street, that's currently under construction for the 2 blocks north of State Street. And this would give CCDC the ability to extend that 2 blocks even further, better connecting the North End neighborhood to downtown with safer bicycle facilities. So I just want to point out here that all of these public improvement project types are very much in alignment with the project types that are in the original West Side Urban Renewal Plan. What we're proposing or including here isn't a big shift. It's more just applying those project types that are already part of the initial plan to new areas in the expansion. So in the plan itself, you'll find the economic feasibility study. When we did this economic feasibility study, we looked at not only the expansion area, but the amended area, or pardon me, the original area and the expansion area. And so with the West Side District having about 6 years remaining on its lifespan, we were able to forecast and plan for projects in not only the original, but the expanded area. So this really helped give us a clear picture on this expansion being feasible. And what the third-party consultant determined was that this boundary adjustment is financially feasible, that the district can afford to carry out the projects that it had planned in its original area, as well as these proposed projects that I just went through. And on that point too, the amendment area isn't necessarily a big revenue generator. It's only about $15,000 a year over the next 6 years. The primary reason for that is that the Boise High School campus, as well as the YMCA block and the church that's included, are all tax exempt properties. So the Carnegie Library and the vacant bank building are the 2 taxable properties. So like I mentioned, this is more of like a boundary adjustment than it is having significant financial changes to this district. The plan amendment itself, like I said, we've been talking to the stakeholders all along the way. Folks seem supportive. Boise school districts expressed their appreciation for being included, and glad to see that we're working together with them, as well as ACHD and many of the city departments as well. We did send out an informative letter last week to all the taxing districts, just as a courtesy heads up that this process is underway and that more information is to follow about the public notices that are necessary to make this amendment if it continues to go forward. And just one point about this plan amendment is it doesn't change the duration of the West Side Urban Renewal District. The sunset date will remain the same in calendar year 2026. And we did double check a number of times, in fact, that this boundary adjustment does fit within the 10% rule that defined in state statute, meaning that an urban renewal district cannot be expanded more than 10% of its original area. This one clocks in at about 9.8%. And we've also double checked the map and legal description that's included with the plan amendment. So we have an initial verification that all of this looks correct and is ready to go. So Megan and I are feeling confident that what we've put together here is a solid amendment. It's been reviewed by folks at the city. We appreciate all the attention it's been getting from staff there, and we're looking forward to seeing this move along more. So Megan, I'd like to turn it over to you now to talk a little bit more about where we are and what the next steps are.
Yes, thank you, Doug. Commissioners, appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I thought Doug did a great job of setting the stage, and really we are here today to provide an overview to you about what is coming before you on October 5th and to offer responses to any questions that you may have in advance of that consideration. As part of this statutory process, these urban renewal plans and or plan amendments come before the Planning and Zoning Commission for a limited review and finding, and it's whether or not the plan amendment is in conformity with the city's comprehensive plan. And typically, the Planning and Zoning Commission is asked to adopt a resolution that's supported by findings that have been prepared by city planning and zoning staff. We understand that resolutions are a bit of an oddity before planning and zoning, and so wanted to bring that to your attention today as it is an unusual process. As we do continue to walk through the process a little bit, as Doug indicated, the agency board considered this plan and approved it on September 14th by resolution. Following that approval, the plan has been formally transmitted to the city. And as part of the statutory process, all of the dates are really tied to the public hearing date before the city council. We have been working very closely with city staff, city attorney's office in preparation for this timeline and feel that we do have something that is very workable. So we are targeting a November 10th public hearing date and first reading date. And the statute calls for a 30-day published notice of public hearing in the paper, as well as a 30-day notice to the affected taxing districts. And the affected taxing districts are those taxing entities that have boundaries overlaying the amendment area. Those have all been identified, and if you peg off the 30 days, we will be looking at publication notice to occur on October 9th, and that's the drop dead date for transmittal of documents to the affected taxing districts. So as part of that process, we are also targeting October 5th for Planning and Zoning's formal consideration of the plan amendment and whether or not it is meets the standard of conformity with the city's comprehensive plan. With that, I think, Doug and I are happy to stand for any questions about the process, about the plan amendment document itself, the slide deck before you, however we can be of assistance in moving this matter forward. So thank you all for the opportunity to speak to you this evening.
Thank you both. Any questions from the other commissioners?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Bratnober.
Yes, I wondered, you talked about the revenues and spelled those out. What are the costs associated with these activities?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Commissioner Bratnober. Those are all spelled out in the economic feasibility study. We worked with professional engineers and landscape architects to identify rough order of magnitude costs associated with the bikeway and the streetscape improvements and these other kind of prototypical projects that we would see in these areas. And so we've estimated those costs and included them in the economic feasibility study. is there a certain project that you're curious about, or we could,
No, I'm just
dive
interested
further
in
into that?
the aggregate at this point. I'll get a chance to drill down a bit later when I can access that study.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Stevens.
I guess I'm curious if now is the time to ask questions or if we should ask them on October 5th.
Yeah, that's probably a better point once we have an opportunity to review the full packet. Staff, do you have any opinion on that matter? Or James?
Commissioners, I would recommend asking questions now because what will be before you on October 5th will just be a resolution. It won't necessarily be a public hearing.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Chair.
Yeah, please, Jennifer.
So I guess I have a follow-up from Commissioner Bratnover's question, which is, and then I have a separate question as well. So, because there's very little revenue being generated by this additional 0.8%, I'm curious where the excess money would have gone had we not included this additional land. And that may just be my lack of total comprehension about how CCDC's revenue streams work. But if you could just briefly address it, if that's possible, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. That's a great question. So we do have the ability to plan and prioritize projects out of our original urban renewal plan. If you go back and look at that, it lists out this West Side District urban renewal plan especially is written in a manner that talks about making streetscape improvements throughout the district, but it doesn't get specific as to, from this block to this block to this block. And so in working through the economic feasibility study and looking through the last 6 years of the district, we've taken time to understand where are the key areas within this district and that are in need of enhancement or repair, and also have forecasted to the best of our abilities at this point what is the potential redevelopment that we see happening and the partnerships that we could potentially assist with in that area, and have balanced that out. So it isn't a black and white sort of list, like these ones aren't happening in the original area in order for the expansion area ones to happen. It's more of a comprehensive look at the original area and the expansion area, and working with stakeholders to make sure that we're not leaving responsibilities in the original area behind in order to go accomplish this expansion area.
Okay, that helps. And then, Mr. Chair, may I ask another question?
Yes, please.
And this may be for city staff, I'm not sure, but the history of urban renewal is often one where historic structures are demoed for redevelopment. And we obviously have a lot of significant historic structures in this area. So, if I'm not mistaken, some protection, I believe that some of this might be in a historic district. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure where the boundaries are. So I guess I'm curious how those things play together. And, if there needs to be any concern from the commission, I assume not, but I would like to get it on the record regarding the protection of the historic buildings that are in the area with this addition.
Celine, any thought on that comment or on that note?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Stevens, I have not been able to review that in detail. We can follow up with that within our report on October 5th.
Mm-hmm. If I may add, Chair, a few comments to the point.
Yep.
I agree with Commissioner Stevens on this, that there is a storied past with urban renewal and the demolition of historic buildings. And the current agency views that as, in fact, the past. And we strive hard to make inroads to, in fact, preserve historic buildings. We participated in the Hawaii Hotel with the facade easement and contributed funds to help that historic building be renovated. Another example is the C.C. Anderson building, or the old Macy's, which is now Athlos Academies, where CCDC was able to participate in a number of ways to help see that building find a new life. And then here in the expansion area, the Carnegie Library, which had been vacant for a while, is now been purchased by Ednetics, which is a digital software company that provides technology to schools. In fact, I think Boise School District's working with them. But they're renovating this historic structure and repurposing it into something that suits their needs. And so we strive to look for those kind of opportunities to assist in historic preservation more so than raising sites and moving in and moving ahead with the things that happened in the 50s and 60s.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Jim, please.
Yeah, coming back on my previous question, I'm not sure I got an answer. And maybe the answer is we get links to the feasibility study. I'm still interested in what the overall costs are that you're talking about. I'll spare you going through it project by project, but I'd sure like to know that, and getting a link to that feasibility study would be helpful as well.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Commissioner, this is Megan Conrad at Elam and Burke. The economic feasibility study is an attachment to the plan amendment, and that will be provided in the packets. I would say the overall projected capital costs of the public infrastructure improvements are, as Doug indicated. There's also an update for the proposed projects within the existing district, as well as proposed projects within the amended area. So I think there's a lot more transparency as to the use of the funds until closeout of this district. And those projected capital costs are $29,279,500. And that is in the economic feasibility study that we part of your packet.
Thank you very much, Megan.
Of course, thank you.
Okay. Well, I think unless there's any other questions from the commission, we appreciate both your time this evening to update us, and we look forward to getting that in more detail for our October meeting.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time.
You bet. See you guys in October.
All right, let's quickly review the agenda for tonight. We'll have the minutes for the August 3rd and August 10th Planning and Zoning Commission. And number 1, SOS 20-24 is a waiver to curb, gutter, and sidewalk. We are recommending denial, so we will need to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
No one has signed up in advance for that one, by the way. Number 2 is a rezone and a variance on property located on Robert Street from C2D to ROD-DA. We are recommending approval. There was some opposition received, which should have been in your late correspondence packet. There are a few people signed up for that tonight, so we will need to hear that one. Number 3 is a rezone and conditional use permit on 4th and Idaho. There were 2 deferral memos in your packet. The first one's requesting deferral to October 12th, and then the second one asking deferral to November 2nd. Just want to make sure that's clear that the deferral request is now for November 2nd.
Okay, so number 3, item 3 is going for November 2.
Correct.
Okay, great.
We should still ask if anyone's here wanting to speak that can't attend November 2nd, but I don't believe we'll have anyone.
Okay, thank you. And we'll do these deferrals separately.
That's correct.
Okay.
And then number 4 is CUP 20-28, a conditional use permit for a special exception on Franklin Street. This one was originally scheduled last week, which asked for deferral to tonight. They've since asked deferral again to October 12th. There are a number of people signed up, but I don't believe many will attend tonight, but it'd still be good to ask if anyone can't attend October 12th. would like to speak tonight. And that's it. So we are only hearing number 1 and number 2, unless there's public testimony for 3 and 4 that can't attend on those respective dates.
In the case of 3 and 4, if we have folks that would like to testify, are we going to hear from staff first, or should we just take the public comment?
Typically, staff does not present when there's a deferral request. So the testimony is put into the record, and we'll include that in the packet when the public hearing item does occur.
Very good.
And I think that's it. Does anyone have any questions?
How's Madam Chair feeling?
Mr. Chair?
Thank you. I'm better, still coughing. So better for me to be at home. Nobody wants a cougher during COVID.
Right. Sorry. And sorry, Jim, go ahead.
Celine, I'm real embarrassed. I do not see late correspondence attached in the packet. The email came through. I see 2 agendas. Maybe I'm blind, but I can't see the late correspondence.
I believe the late correspondence, I don't think I emailed you individual attachments because one packet was way too large. So they would have been on the meeting portal website.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I got to go back to that. I must.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Janelle. Mm-hmm.
I actually couldn't find it as well, and I went to the link. So I looked for a little bit and could not locate it. So I had some problems as well.
Well,
If memory serves, Celine, on, sorry, it was item 2, correct? Late correspondence was item 2.
late correspondence would have been for item 2, 3, and 4.
Right.
I can share my screen and show you where that should be because I'm seeing it for me. Hold on one moment. Okay, so under this evening's commission meeting, item 2 has late correspondence right here. Item 3 has 2 deferral memos because we would have seen one in the original packet and then the late correspondence packet. And then number 4, there's a deferral memo right here. Jim, Janelle, you're not seeing those links?
Yeah, I actually went to the link and it didn't show up for me, but that's really weird because it it's the same view and everything, but I just couldn't actually connect to those late correspondence. And I looked, I actually was able to go back to the 14th and see the late correspondence there, but it just didn't show up for me. I'm not even sure why. It was weird. But it could just be me. I don't, I mean, maybe. Once you go through the entire packet and you go to the late correspondence, you're,
Right.
I don't know, maybe I was confused, but yeah, I know where it is now, so I'll make sure to.
I will clarify that the agenda packet, when you download the actual packet, that is the packet that we distribute on either Monday or Tuesday before the hearing. The late correspondence is not included in this agenda packet because we would have to repackage and redistribute, and that takes a lot of time. It manipulates the record. So we just include these late correspondence attachments additionally on top of it. We don't repackage the agenda packet. So not sure if that helps. This agenda packet would download as a PDF and not as a view like this. Jim, are you seeing it now?
No, I'm off in the weeds. I clicked that I ended up vectored to the 9:14 meeting, so I'm way hosed. I'll dig in here and hunt for it as I can. I'm sure sorry about that, but I looked and could not find it.
Okay, let's offline that because you should be able to see it.
Yep. Clearly it's operator error. Thank you.
No, I just so you guys know, the link was wrong. And you had to go into the meetings and click on today's meeting to find the late correspondence. But the link was wrong this time.
I apologize
Thank
for
you,
that.
Jennifer.
All right. there are no other questions, I think we can get started. All right, good evening and welcome to the Boise City Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing. A few things to start out for tonight's proceedings. Everyone from the public entering the hearing has been automatically muted and cannot speak. As the item you're interested in comes up for discussion, you'll be called upon and unmuted. There is a chat function in Zoom. This is not part of the record and should only be used if technical difficulties arise. If the chat function isn't available for you, you can always email zoninginfo@cityofboise.org with any technical issues. Again, that's zoninginfo@cityofboise.org. Our procedures for the public hearings begin with a presentation from the planning team. Then we'll go to the applicant and the representative of the Registered Neighborhood Association, followed by questions from the commission. After that, we proceed to the public testimony, starting with those who signed up on the online sign-up sheet in advance, and then anyone else who raises their hand virtually. If you're attending through your telephone, you can type in *9 to raise your hand. Each member of the public is allowed up to 3 minutes for testimony. We are strict with this time as it is limited in code. Finally, the applicant is allowed 5 minutes for rebuttal, after which the hearing will be closed and the commission will deliberate and render a decision. Tonight's agenda and proceedings might have a bit of a delay as we all navigate with the technology. Please be courteous and kind while we venture through this hybrid format. Mr. Chair, you have the floor.
Good evening. We are citizen volunteers appointed by the mayor and approved by the city council. We make final decisions on conditional use permits, variances, and appeals, and recommendations to the city council on subdivisions, rezones, annexations, and code or comprehensive plan amendments. Any decision made tonight may be appealed to the city council, provided that the appeal is filed within 10 days of this hearing. In order to file an appeal, you must have given written or oral testimony at tonight's meeting. So that's why it is important to give your name and address when you testify tonight. We utilize a consent agenda. This means that if the applicant agrees with the staff report and if there is no public opposition, the item will be placed on the consent agenda. All items that are placed on the consent agenda are approved with one motion without further public comment. For items not on the consent agenda, we will hold a full public hearing in the order just detailed a few minutes ago with staff, applicant, neighborhood association, and then the public testimony. Thank you all for virtually attending tonight. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Stead. Stead.
Here.
Schaefer.
Here.
Squires. Blanchard. Moore.
Here.
Stevens.
Here.
Gillespie. Finfrock.
Here.
Bratnober.
Here.
6 present, 3 absent.
Okay, thank you. Short consent agenda this evening. Without objection, I'll place the minutes from our meeting on August 3rd and the meeting on August 10th on the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Moore.
I'd like to place the minutes of the meeting from August 3rd and August 10th on the consent agenda.
Second.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Will the clerk, any discussion? Very good. Will the clerk please call the vote?
Stead.
Aye.
Schaefer.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Stevens.
Aye.
Finfrock.
Aye.
Bratnober.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay. Relatively short agenda in new business this evening. We're planning to hear items number 1 and 2, and then we have a couple of deferrals that we'll tackle right now. First up is item number 3. That's CAR 20-7 and CUP 20-23, Ball Ventures Alquist. This is at 200 North 4th Street. It's a rezone and CUP application. They are requesting deferral to the November 2nd meeting. Is there anyone here this evening in attendance that would like to testify regarding this item, and you cannot be here on November 2nd? Okay, seeing no hands up, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Moore.
I'd like to move that we defer item number 3, CAR 20-7 and CUP 20-23 to November 2nd.
Second.
Got a motion from Commissioner Moore and a second from Commissioner Stead. Any discussion? Very good. Will the clerk please call the vote?
Stead,
Aye.
Schaefer,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Stevens,
Aye.
Finfrock,
Aye.
Bratnober.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay, thank you. And then item number 4 is CUP 20-28, Franklin Hospitality Group at 1502 West Franklin Street. This is a conditional use permit application. The applicant is also requesting deferral to the October 12th meeting. Is there anyone in attendance this evening that is not able to testify on October 12th? Okay, very good. No hands up, and we only have one individual in the audience here this evening. So with that, do I have a motion for deferral?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Finfrock.
I move to defer CUP 20-28 to October 12th, 2020.
Second.
Got a motion from Commissioner Finfrock and a second from Commissioner Stead. Any discussion? Very good. Will the clerk please call the vote?
Stead,
Aye.
Schaefer,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Stevens,
Aye.
Finfrock,
Aye.
Bratnober.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay. I think that does it for our consent and deferrals. We'll go back to new business item number 1. That's SOS 20-24. Janine Brickerhoff at 3607 North Collister Drive. And I believe we're going to hear from Mr. Kevin Holmes representing staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Wait for the slide deck to load up here for you. Perfect. All right, before you is a request for a waiver to the subdivision ordinance requirements to construct frontage improvements associated with a minor land division. Subject property zoned R1C and shown here in red is located on the west side of Collister Drive, just north of the intersection of Collister and State Streets, which is a designated community activity center. So in 2019, the property was approved for a minor land division to create a total of 3 parcels, as you see here at the top. One condition of approval was to improve the frontage along Collister with curb, gutter, and sidewalk. The applicant is requesting the waiver of this condition based on 4 grounds. So these include the removal of trees and shrubs, supposed opposition from the neighborhood to these improvements, and the expense of the work that would be required related to storm water management and irrigation facilities. As detailed further in the project report, both ACHD and the Collister Neighborhood Association support building improvements here. As you can see in this diagram, this section of Collister is lacking a complete pedestrian connection to the Community Activity Center to the south. And this property really provides that crucial first link to getting those in. There is potential that the neighboring properties shown in green here will redevelop in a similar fashion to the subject property, and therefore really a decent likelihood that improvements all along the west side of Collister could be realized through redevelopment. In conclusion, it's for these reasons that the planning team recommends the commission deny the request to waive the subdivision ordinance requirements. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. Now we'll go ahead and hear from the applicant. Yep, please do. Applicant is here in City Hall.
Do you still have to wear the mask?
You can take the mask down, please.
Thank you. It
Yeah.
fogs the glasses up.
Sure thing.
Uh, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Pat Teely, office address 12594 Explorer, and I'm representing the client, Ms. Brinkerhoff. We believe that, well, there's several things that cause hardship on this property. From Bloom Street to the north to State Street, there is over 2,500 feet of frontage on all of the lots. There's 400 feet of improved frontage out of that 2,500 feet. We have 87 feet of frontage, and being in the business for so long, we have seen time after time that ACHD builds improvements thinking that everything's the way it should be, and then they adjust the target and they end up taking out improvements that they build. Right now, there's 200 feet of curb gutter sidewalk to the north. ACHD is let me back up a little bit here, I guess. In the initial review, city did request curb gutter sidewalk as is normal. The staff comments from ACHD on May 20th. Item C, staff comments or recommendations. And I'm quoting, ACHD does not require frontage improvements for this type of development application. And that's out of their report of May 20th. They go on to say, if the city of Boise requires roadway improvements as part of this application, the applicant shall be required to, and then they go into what they will require in the curb gutter sidewalk. And then they go on to say after that, if only sidewalk is required by the city, then they have another condition. We don't believe that in the interest of just good common sense that you don't take a street like Collister and design it 87 feet at a time. It's like going out State Street and saying, okay, you got 100 feet of frontage, put in curb gutter and sidewalk. It just doesn't work. The drainage concepts have to be worked out, and the street sections and driveway approaches worked out. We think this is too much of a burden to put on this property. They have already mentioned that if curb gutter and sidewalk is required by the city, and only by the city, it's not required by them unless you require it, that we'll have to maintain the drainage along that street. Well, that drainage can come from a long ways away. And all of a sudden, our 87 feet of frontage is being required to contend with drainage that can come up to as far as, I think 700 feet is their limit. And that is quite an expense. I mean, we don't have anywhere to put it on the property. It'd take most of our property to contend with this drainage anyway. If we were able to put it in subsurface drainage, we've gone through estimates, including engineering, surveying, and construction, along with having to move the irrigation ditch that's there, upwards of $50,000. I mean, it's quite an effort. It is substantial in contradiction of what the city says in their reason for the decision. They say would not result in a substantial hardship. I guess we beg to differ in that also. We understand that Collister is a busy street and it does need some improvements, but it needs it on a full scale, not just 87 feet at a time. We would prefer not to build any of it, the 87 feet. 40 feet of it is going to be a driveway approach, which will be required to do anyway. So basically, the only thing they're getting is another 40 feet. Along with the drainage, there's a small ditch on the side that we would have to reroute, basically put in 4 boxes. You'd put in a diversion box, angle point, run it through the property and bring it back into alignment. That's what causes the prices to get way out of whack for a project like this. Given this, and the client understands the problem out there in Collister, if the requirement for sidewalk were the only thing that the city would require, it would really mitigate our problems and expense, and it would solve the problems of the neighborhood and the city. The comments in the staff report are basically centered around the sidewalk being the problem. So the client would, in the interest of safety and the neighborhood, and would approve building the sidewalk, but in alignment with what's out there. Right now, if we were to build the curb gutter sidewalk, the sidewalk that comes down from the north would have to be rerouted over 5 feet. It doesn't match up with what their required improvements now. So it's really not the thing to do. Stand for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Teely. We're going to hold for questions just 1 minute. We'd like to hear from the Neighborhood Association first.
Sure.
I believe we have a representative from the association online.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Hello there. Hi, Esther. If you can start with your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, my name is Esther Seha, and I reside at 3901 North Cambria Way, Boise, 83703. And this evening, I am representing the Collister Neighborhood Association. I am the Planning and Zoning Board Committee member, and I would like to start out with thanking you, Chair and committee members, for the opportunity to provide comment on behalf of the Collister Neighborhood Association. In reviewing the applicant information, there was some documentation indicating that the Neighborhood Association is opposed to curb, gutter, and sidewalks. And we wanted to provide official comment and set the record straight that the Neighborhood Association is not opposed to curb, gutter, and sidewalks. Our Collister Neighborhood Association plan speaks to sidewalks. There's just one minor caveat, and that's our Sycamore overlay area. And then in 2018, we did conduct a survey. It was a neighborhood boundary wide survey. And, we have heard from residents there is interest in connectivity, sidewalk connectivity throughout our neighborhood. And so we submitted an official comment, but we did want to provide verbal comment during this timeframe. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll go ahead and bring it back to the commission for any questions of the applicant, staff, or the neighborhood association.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Stevens.
I just want to clarify for the record, this is for staff. This minor land division was done in 2019, and at the time was conditioned on putting the sidewalk, gutter, and curb in. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Stevens, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Bratnober.
Thanks. This question is for either staff or the applicant, or maybe both. I'm trying to understand as I look at the layout of things in this area, why it is so complex. It looks fairly straightforward from the way I'm looking at it. 4 different irrigation boxes sounds like a lot. When I look at the area to the north, I'm assuming that same irrigation setup runs that way. And so I'm struggling to understand the burden here. Someone could clarify, that would be wonderful.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Bratnober, if I'm understanding your question correctly, I mean, why the irrigation facilities are set up the way they are is kind of a tough one to answer. I don't have that information off the top of my head.
Well, I just don't see where they are and how they relate to this. I see something that looks kind of like a swale, but that's about it.
Yeah. So Commissioner Bratnober, okay, yeah. So really, and the applicant may be able to clarify this a little bit further too, since they've done some detailed surveying of the site. But you know, it appears that there is a open irrigation facility right in front of the property here. It does just look like a swale, and then there is a small, you can't quite see it in this picture, but concrete box down there as well, just right in that corner. Hopefully that helps clarify.
Sorry, fumbling with my mute button. Mr. Chair?
Yeah, please, Jim.
So I'm assuming then some sort of subterranean tiling the ditch, et cetera, that is not acceptable here. I mean, that's quite often done. There's a connection point with the street to the south. Again, I'm sorry I'm so dense this afternoon, but just trying to understand it.
And Mr. Chair, Commissioner Bratnober, it may be best to direct this towards the applicant, how they would plan to do that, as it sounds like they have done some detailed engineering, or at least preliminary engineering in that regard.
Thank you.
Mr. Teely, would you like to provide a little input on how you would approach the irrigation facility?
At the would be the northeast corner, directly adjacent to the existing sidewalk. There is a open box. It doesn't have a top on it. There's 4 pipes that come together right there to irrigate 4 different properties. If we were to extend the sidewalk to the south towards State Street, it would basically be in the same, pretty close to the same place as that, what you call a swale there. That is just an open irrigation ditch.
Mm-hmm.
So that swale would have to be changed and rerouted at the northeast corner there. You have to route it to the west, whether it be a foot or 2 or 5 feet. We'll have to figure that out. I think ACHD would want it out of their future right away. So if that were the case, it'd have to go about 10 feet to the west. So that's 2 boxes. And then it'd have to head to the south, to our south property line with another box, and then redirect back out to the east to connect with the existing open ditch, so the water could proceed to the south. Does that clarify anything?
Somewhat. I'm just struggling to understand why you have 2 areas where it goes under a driveway, and it goes under what looks like an alley or another street there to the south, and why those aren't connection points for just basically tiling that ditch.
The problem is, if you build the sidewalk there, that ditch will be directly adjacent to the sidewalk. So basically you could step right off the west side of the sidewalk into that ditch. So we have to pipe it. And the only way to pipe it is to direct it again, like I said. The other problem is that the ditch is so darned close to the surface. It's, the flow line is that swale, and it's only about a foot deep. We'd have to put it in the boxes. We would have to basically deepen it in a section, basically make a siphon out of the system. Water would have to go down into a box and come back up on the south.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions from the commission?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Moore?
So as we go north, there's a box on the north that diverts the drainage somewhere. As it goes north, where is that drainage line going? Is it below the sidewalk? Is that where it exists currently?
I didn't understand that.
So if you've got your drainage ditch on the northern properties,
Drainage, you said?
your drainage line for the northern properties that's already piped, is it
Do you
exist?
mean the irrigation?
I think Commissioner Moore means the
Yeah,
irrigation.
the irrigation, yeah. So if those are for the northern properties, that exists underneath the current sidewalk as built?
No, it's really a mess of a system. From that box, it goes at about 30 degrees northwest into a box up on Laura Street there. And so it stays away from the sidewalk, but it is in a pipe. Yeah, the other thing I wanted to clarify, that my memory served me right, that about 10 or 11 years ago, Collister neighborhood and ACHD were going to put together a project to do Collister the way it should be done, design it. At that time, the neighborhood, there was enough opposition in the neighborhood level that ACHD dropped the project. Now, I understand that things have changed, and I talked with the representative also, and I understand their want for this connectivity, but it all seems to focus around the sidewalk. And like I say, the applicant would be willing to put that sidewalk in, still cause a lot of problems, but we'd lose all of the trees and bushes along Collister that screen the neighborhood, or screen the existing house, but we see the need for that.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Finfrock?
Yeah, question for the city, but these were all known conditions with the prior application, is that right? They knew that this was going to be an issue, but they were still required to put in the curb and the sidewalks, the curb gutter sidewalk?
Mr. Chair, and Commissioner Finfrock, yeah, that's correct. This is a standard condition with all minor land divisions if there's not frontage improvements that they need to go in. So it wasn't a surprise.
Thank you.
Okay, last call for questions from the commission. All right, very good. We're going to go ahead and open up for public testimony. If there's anyone online this evening here to testify on this item, please raise your hand. Looks like no takers, and we had no one sign up in advance either. So with that, we will go ahead and return it back to the applicant. Mr. Thiele, you do have a few minutes for rebuttal if you have any other final comments.
Just as a final comment, we did realize that curb gutter and sidewalk are requirements of minor land divisions. But until you get into the design of it and what the ACHD is going to require, we didn't know how to react. And this is basically how we're, I guess we can offer a solution to the problem, that's building the sidewalk in the interest of the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thiele. All right, with that, I will return this item back to the commission. What's the commission's pleasure?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Stevens.
I'd like to move that we deny SOS 20-24.
Second.
I've got a motion for denial from Commissioner Stevens and a second from Commissioner Stead. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Stevens.
We get these a lot, and we are very clear as a commission that this is how our code is set up, that as redevelopment occurs, this is an improvement that developers have to make, so that our city can resemble the vision that the comprehensive plan lays out for us. So per the staff report, it's very clear in section 110902-1 that these things shall be done. This is not a if, when, or where. And I don't feel that there has been a clear, compelling reason to provide or to grant a waiver with regard to the landscaping. Those are not the kind that sort of shrub wall, if you will. I'm sure there's a better word for it according to the landscape folks on the commission. But that's not the kind of mature tree that we need to be saving for a sidewalk. Clearly a sidewalk is what we need to be having there to connect to the activity center. So I don't feel that there's been a compelling reason for a waiver, and I move to deny.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevens. Yes, Commissioner Stead.
I agree with Commissioner Stevens. I wish that there were ways for us to do it that were more sweeping, as the applicant suggested, but that's not always the option. And so sometimes we do piecemeal it, but as we've seen with this city, change will come. And so we've got to start somewhere. So I agree with Commissioner Stevens and will support the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Stead. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Moore?
I think particularly because there is sidewalk curb gutter on the north and then sidewalk curb gutter further south, having that connection just makes sense if it's in the comprehensive plan. And yeah, it's the right move.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Moore. Any other discussion? Just real quick. Yeah, I'm in favor of the motion as well, per the comments already mentioned from Commissioner Stevens instead and more. It's how the city's improved, and I understand that it is sometimes complicated and can be costly, but I think that's sort of the cost of doing business, and that's how the city improves. And I think additionally, this was a known condition going back to the minor land development back in 2019. So this is not a surprise by any means. So I think in fairness to other applicants and being consistent with how we apply the code and our conditions, I see no reason to not support this motion. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and have the clerk call the vote. We have a motion to deny SOS 20-24 from Commissioner Stevens and a second from Commissioner Stead.
Stead. Stead.
Aye.
Schaefer.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Stevens.
Aye.
Finfrock.
Aye.
Bratnover.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all. All right, and we'll move on to item number 2 this evening, CAR 20-11 and CVA 20-34 at 1511 South Robert Street. This is a rezone and a variance request, and representing staff will be David Moser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. The applicant is requesting a rezone of 0.23 acres from C2D, General Commercial Design Review, to ROD, Residential Office with Design Review and a Development Agreement located at 1115 South Robert Street. A variance to encroach into the side setback associated with a 4-story residential building containing 16 dwelling units is also included. Please note that residential uses, including multifamily, are allowed in the proposed RO zone. As such, the only application being requested by the applicant tonight is the rezoned RO, and the variance for the balconies to encroach into the side setback. The subject property, as you can see here on the slide, is currently vacant and located 1 block off of Vista Avenue along Robert Street. It is located within a community activity center at the intersection of Vista Avenue and Overland Road, and which includes a mix of commercial, office, and residential uses within that activity center. I would also note that there are residential houses along Robert Street to the south of the property, this aerial photograph's a little old, but those houses would be located right about here. Also, the applicant submitted revised site and landscape plans, building elevations, floor plans, and a 3D rendering, which were sent to the commission as late correspondence. I apologize for that, the commission not being able to get it, but they're just revised plans showing minor corrections to the elevations, the renderings, and the site plan. The revised site plan shows the balconies encroaching 1.5 feet into the side yard setback, and thereby maintaining a 2-foot setback from the property line. As you can see from the land use designation map and the zoning map here, the property is located in a mixed use land use designation and currently zoned C2. The property adjacent to the north, south, and west are zoned C2. Abutting the subject property is a parking lot and a single-story commercial building to the north and south respectively. And also to the west are commercial buildings along Vista Avenue. The area to the east across Robert Street is zoned office and comprised of 3-story office buildings, churches, and some single-family residential along Robert Street to the south. The subject property is designated mixed use on the land use map. And as stated in the blueprint Boise, the intent of this land use designation is to provide a foundation for community activity center development. This goal is consistent with the intent of the RO zone, which is designed to facilitate mixed use developments and provide higher density residential uses with an emphasis on high quality urban design. To support these goals, most of the zoning districts are permissible in this mixed use land use designation. However, due to its location, most of the districts would allow development that would be considered underutilization of the site or just not appropriate given the context of the neighborhood. However, the more acceptable zones, such as the R3, C2, PC, would be allowed here, including the RO zone. But I would note that the RO zone, which allows for higher density and promotes more pedestrian-friendly uses and designs, this would be considered the best zone for the rezone of the site. Also, there are 2 Valley Regional Transit routes and bus stops in close proximity to the site. The associated bus stops for the Vista Route 3 and Overland Route 28 are located approximately 300 feet to the southwest at the intersection of these 2 roadways. And development of high-density residential adjacent to transit routes is supported by the comprehensive plan. A development agreement was included, and the development agreement limits the project density to a maximum of 16 units and the building height to 45 feet. These limitations to density and building height will ensure the project is compatible with the adjacent offices and residential neighborhood to the west. The applicant is requesting a variance for the balconies on the north and south side of the building to cantilever 5.5 feet into the required setback. However, the main building will comply with the required setbacks of the RO zone, or the proposed RO zone, and which includes a 7.5-foot setback from each property line for a total combined of 15 feet. There is an exceptional circumstance that justifies these variances in that the C2 zoning for the subject property and the surrounding neighborhood would allow for similar building size and mass with a 0 side yard setback. As such, the proposed balcony encroachments are consistent with the adjacent properties and their future anticipated development. Also, to accommodate the anticipated higher densities on this 0.223 acre parcel, the balcony encroachments would provide more usable open space and more usable living space within the dwelling units. The planning team did receive 2 letters of opposition. The main concerns expressed within these letters are the impacts associated from increased traffic, density, and parking from the project. And I would note ACHD stated that there is capacity on the adjacent roadway to support the rezone, and most of the traffic would be using the alley. The site provides compliant parking as per the development code, which is 32 parking spaces, and it does include car lifts. And finally, the proposed density associated with the RO zone is encouraged and promoted in this location by the comprehensive plan, since it is within a community activity center and along public transit routes. So in summary, the rezone of the variance will comply with all the required findings as per code. The planning team recommends approval of the requested rezone to RO and the variance for the balconies to encroach into the side setback. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Okay, we'll go ahead and hear from the applicant. And I believe I think Ben is online, yeah?
Yep.
Yep, oh, there you are. Hello, Ben.
I Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Ben Semple, 1014 South LaPointe Street, Suite 3, Boise, Idaho 83706. I want to thank David for his presentation. I think he did a great job kind of outlining what the project entails. First and foremost, we are in agreement with the staff report and all of the associated terms and conditions of approval. As Mr. Moser stated, this is a rezone of the property from C2D to ROD. We still would retain the design review overlay. We are also going to enter into a development agreement with the city, which would cap the number of units on the property to 16. There would be a higher density allowed within the RO, but in discussions with city planning staff, they felt that 16 units was appropriate. And just as a note, the C2 zone would have allowed up to 10 residential units here, as well as a building that had 0-foot setbacks from both sides. Still would include the 10-foot setback from the front. I am going to share my screen just to walk through a little bit more. Mr. Moser did present this site plan. This is the revised site plan showing the building mass. The stair tower, the lobby, and the elevator tower are set to the 10-foot setback. That's the required setback of not only the C2, but the RO zone off of the front. We exceed the rear setback. All traffic would enter in off of an alley into the parking area below the building. There are 2 parking spaces exterior to the building, but pretty heavily screened with landscaping. The building, while it is 4 stories, the upper story is set back an additional about 11 feet from the main building wall, which is here, to provide some additional articulation and as well as pull that height back. We're 45 feet to the peak of our sloped roof. Typically, you'd measure that to the center line of the pitched roof. And about a block away from here is the GEM Center for the Arts. Actually contacted the building maintenance individual there. He had the original blueprints from that building, and that building is at 40 feet to the parapet wall. And then there's another commercial building directly across Bank Drive from that is essentially the same building at 40 feet. As Mr. Moser stated, this is in a neighborhood activity center. We are proposing 1 bedroom, 1.5 bed or bathroom units. This would be the first floor parking, stair tower on the rear and front for ingress egress per fire code, the entry lobby and elevator, and the mechanical and fire sprinkler room, because this will be fire sprinkled. The first level of the building has a residential unit, so technically the second floor of the building, 6 units. All of them have very substantial balconies that come off of them to provide some good usable outdoor area. Those do encroach up to 2 feet from the property line. We're still going through some designs where those may end up further from the property line. But that is, again, well below any C2 zoning, as well as it provides for that articulation along the sides. 3rd floor is the same. And then the 4th floor, as discussed, the main building walls pulled back further. That allows for some rooftop patios for those individuals. The stair towers and elevators open up onto an open walkway from that balcony into the interior hallway. We do have some elevations of those. These are the revised elevations that were submitted to the city and made it into the late correspondence package. This would be the rear, the west elevation off of the alley. This is the entry into the parking garage. This is the front elevation off of Robert Street, and then south and north elevations. North fronts on a parking lot associated with the Wells Fargo Bank on Bank Drive, and then the south faces a commercial building that is currently constructed there. In looking at the 3-dimensional model, this would be the Robert Street frontage. This is the elevator tower, the mechanical room and fire riser room, and then the stair towers on this side. As you can see, those balconies, and we do have some awnings over the upper balcony just to provide weather protection on those. But those provide a lot of visual interest and that shadowing that design review looks for. again, we will be going through a design review of this project as well. This would be the north elevation, again, looking from kind of the northeast. This is, this would be the north elevation. This is the northwest, northwest elevation. Again, the stair tower on the back. Southwest elevation and the south elevation. And this was just a rooftop showing the exterior rooftop balconies for the associated upper level units. And to clarify, these are condominium units, so they will be for sale. After the building is constructed, a condo plat will be processed through the city and the county to establish these as condos, so they will be for sale. This is not an apartment building. The development agreement and design review will definitely ensure that we're meeting all the design standards of the city. And we feel like this extensive landscaping that we're putting in here, the entry here will have some bike racks and the mailbox cluster out front, kind of a small plaza, if you will, out front here, keeps it very pedestrian oriented. We exceed the landscape requirements for the frontage along here with multiple deciduous shade trees, as well as some evergreen trees, shrubs, and perennials, flowering perennials. Trash service will be provided in an enclosure off the alley. We are dedicating an additional 1 foot of right-of-way off the alley per ACHD staff report and their request. As David stated, we have 16 surface parking spaces. The owner will be installing car lifts so that gets that parking count to 32, which far exceeds the parking requirement for a structure with this many units in it, especially when considering the adjacent transit lines that are available, proximity to services such as grocery, offices, retail, employment opportunities. And so for that reason, we definitely feel like this is a great addition to the neighborhood. It does introduce another residential housing type. Obviously, Boise's looking for different housing types. There are some single family residences on this street. And then as well as further to the east, there is a residential neighborhood, but obviously that intersection of Overland and Vista is very busy and really high intensity use. So we feel like introducing this new housing type provides for individuals that want condominium living close to downtown and close to services. That's in a very high quality building. The developer of this building is also the same developer that developed the River Street condo project on 15th and River, as well as currently under construction is a project in the river district of Garden City, or Riverfront District down there off of 36th. And with that, I would stand for questions.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Before we go to questions, we'll see if we have a representative from the Depot Bench Neighborhood Association in attendance. And it looks like maybe we do not have anybody representing the Depot Bench Neighborhood Association. So with that, we will go ahead and open up for questions from the commission.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Finfrock.
Question for the city. Are there any amenities that are required for these types of builds?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, since it's not a planned unit development, all we're looking, it's the multifamily is just allowed. Certain amenities, there are no specific amenities required for this particular build, although they are providing the outdoor space within, within the balconies.
Mr. Chair. One more question for the city.
Sure. Go ahead, Janelle.
Okay, thank you. As far as Blueprint Boise's definition of high quality urban design, how does the city define high quality urban design when looking at these applications?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the high quality urban design, I think, is things that are more, I think we would look at basically the design review guideline standards that in the criteria for articulation, fenestration, things of that nature within those guidelines as a place to start on what would be good quality urban design. A lot of that, though, I try to leave to the design review planners as much as possible. But when I'm looking at this, I try to work with the applicant to get the building in the right place and the footprint right, right where it should be, and where we want it to be, and in the landscaping where we want it to be. And then leave the sort of the details on high quality on materials, things of that nature, to be worked out at design review itself. But we look at those design review guideline standards as a reference on what would define that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Stevens.
I have a question for you, David, too. So I noticed that the sidewalk that the city recommends that we require is on the alley. And I was curious why, and then also if it's attached or detached. Or maybe I'm reading it wrong, but that's what I thought I read.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the sidewalk is actually along Robert Street, and it is attached, attached sidewalk, which would match the existing sidewalk along that local street. There is no sidewalk improvements along the alley itself. Not that I.
Thanks. Under number 6, it was sort of written in a way that made me think that the sidewalk was in the alley, and I thought that was strange. So thank you. And so it is attached. Is that what you said?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Moore.
And this is a question for staff. So in granting of this variance, you have, if my understanding is correct, you'd have about 2 feet to the property line from the balconies. Would that, were the property to the north, which is a parking lot now, to develop in a similar way, would if they be restricted in any way because of this variance, because of the location of those balconies?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the property, if you take, let's say, the property to the north, which is currently a parking lot, if they develop, they would have to provide a minimum 5-foot setback off of their property line, because this is now a residential use and the code requires that for it. I don't see the encroachment of a 2-foot setback or proposed 2-foot setback for the balconies hindering any future development to the north, since they would also have to provide an additional setback now because of the proposed residential.
Thank you.
Okay, last call for questions. All right, very good. Thanks, everybody. We'll go ahead and open this up now for public testimony. We had a few folks sign up ahead of time. I have Mike DiVittorio, Matt Wigglesworth, Amanda Corleone, and Tammy Martin signed up. We'll start. I see a couple of those names online, so we'll start with Mike DiVittorio. I see your hand is raised. Mike, if you could.
Can you hear me?
You can. If you could start with your name and address, you'll have.
My name's Mike DiVittorio. I live at 925 Park Hill Court in Boise. And I just wanted to read a little statement that I provided a little bit late to the city staff. I'd like to express my support for the rezone. I own a property at across the street on Vista. Across Vista at 2 Juniper, so it's almost directly across Vista. I own that and a number of other properties in town that I operate as rentals. I also do small scale development, but I've lost my appetite to do a lot more development now, and because of the lack of affordable building sites, neighborhood resistance, and all the other costs associated with infill. So in support of this and other projects that are worthy, that will provide more affordable and available housing stock, let me make the following points. We have a very severe housing shortage. in Boise. It's leading to rising rents and rising home values. With incomes rising very modestly, we've seen rents and home prices increase by 50+% in the last 5 years. Members of our community are being priced out of the market and forced to move away from Boise. Most are choosing to stay in the Treasure Valley, and they're becoming longer range commuters. Based on the current trajectory, many of the children in our Boise school system will not be able to afford to live in Boise when they graduate from high school and college. So I ask you to contemplate that for the future. And then second point is, I think our comp plan is outdated. I think our overly restrictive zoning regulations and outdated parking requirements make intense development very costly, risky, time intensive, and difficult to justify as a developer. So if you deny applications like this one, there will be a continuing decline in developer interest in producing housing that the city so desperately needs. So I'll end by saying, let's make room for more Boiseans to remain in Boise by doing the following. Approve this application and increase housing supply, especially in locations where it makes sense, like this one, which is by a neighborhood center and a transit corridor. We need to reduce the barriers for intense development and redevelopment activity where it makes sense, like this. We should consider providing incentives to developers. We should be asking developers to produce good products like this one. And lastly, our parking requirements, while they are code, are very outdated, and they just beget more people in cars rather than incenting people to consider walking, riding, or taking public transit.
Time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, we also had Matt Wigglesworth signed up in advance. Matt, are you online? Okay, I see no hands up. Moving down the list, we have Amanda Corleone. Is Amanda online? I see no hands up. Move on down to Tammy Martin. Tammy, are you online?
Mr. Chair, I believe these folks might have signed up for the wrong item.
Oh, okay. Very good.
But they were on this item, so we left them on the list just in
Gotcha.
case.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you, staff. All right. Is there anybody else online that would like to speak this evening? See a hand up for Tracy, excuse me, Tracy Battistoni. I apologize, Tracy. Go ahead and unmute. You'll have your name and address first, please, and then 3 minutes for testimony.
Okay, I'm sorry. My name is actually Steve Battistoni. The Zoom account was my wife's, Tracy. So Steve Battistoni, 1526 South Robert. Were you able to hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Thank you, Steve. Go ahead.
Real quick, thanks a lot for your time. I just have some quick things. I'm kind of in opposition to this. I went to the pre-meeting with that Ben, I think Ben had before. I think it's too tall for the area. I mean, I'd like to see the 3D rendering with the actual building of the little massage parlor and stuff next to it, because I think those balconies are going to be, you could just pretty much step over to the top of that other building. That building's going to just look huge. I don't know if there's any issues in regards. I saw that there's the 14 spots, it looks like, and the spots outside. I don't know if there's handicap issues with that building, if some of those spots are going to get eaten up with any handicap spots. My overall opinion of it is, I think it's just too big. I don't think it's a common size building for that area. There's a building on the back side that's a little bit bigger, and there's a bank down the street at the end of the block. I think the density is maybe a little bit too heavy for right there. That's ultimately my stuff. And I think I'd talk to somebody else maybe about like the alley entrance and stuff, and somebody else may speak to that as far as like, is the city going to be taking on the clearing that alley out? Because I don't believe they clear any alleys out right now for snow or anything, do they? And who's going to take that on? If that's the case, if the city's taking that on, are they going to clean my alley out all day too, every day that's snowy? Ultimately, like I said, my biggest, I don't have a problem with them putting in some item over there or putting some in some building over there. I just think this one's too big. When you put it in there, and if you actually had the buildings to scale next to that 3D model, I think it'd be easy to see this building is just going to dwarf these. It's like I said before at the other meeting, I think it's like putting a monster truck next to a regular pickup truck, and you're going to see how out of place it might look. And 45 feet just seems to be high. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for your time and listening to me.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Okay, I have a hand up for Paula Glenn.
Can you hear me?
We can. Hi, Paula. If you can start with your name and address, please. Then you have 3 minutes.
Here, it's 1532 South Robert. And I did send a letter. I have some concerns. Again, like Steve, I think that this is too large for the area. I understand that, you know, development is it's needed, and that we need some more housing. I question whether or not we need this dense a housing. 14 spaces are really a parking spaces. And I think the creative solution for the parking, putting in lifts, is an interesting prospect. I don't think it's realistic. And therefore, I'm kind of concerned where all these cars are going to park. Again, like Steve, I'm trying to figure out in the alleyway who's going to be clearing that, because I have an alleyway into my driveway as well, and I have to clear that. Nobody else clears that. So the turning radius is going to be pretty tight coming in and out of the alley. The other question I have is, I know that they're talking about affordable housing. We haven't really seen what the proposed cost of these units is going to be. And I don't think it's realistic to assume that these are going to be purchased by people who live in Boise. I see that there is a housing shortage at the university, and that these could potentially be investment properties used for that purpose. And I know some people who are supporting it are purchased for investment properties as well. I mean, I'm a homeowner. I'm not into it for an investment. I'm not trying to make money off of my house and rent it out to and flip it, that type of stuff. So those are some of my concerns. I just think it's way too large. I think it's, you know, and if the person next door on the south side, where it's not a parking lot, chooses to build one of these as well, kind of concerned as to, you know, the look and feel of the neighborhood is going to become apartment complexes. Even though it's a condo there's nothing stopping someone from buying them and renting them out. So that's kind of where I'm, you know, I'm opposed to something this large here. I think you could satisfy some requirement for additional housing without going quite this large.
Okay, thank you, Paula. Do you have anyone else online that would like to testify this evening on this item? Okay, I see no more hands raised. So with that, we'll go ahead and return this back to the applicant. The applicant has a few minutes for rebuttal. So Ben, maybe we'll start with 5 minutes. Will that do it for you?
Oh yeah, that'll be great. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, just to address a couple concerns there. One, for design review, there was a question about, you know, high quality urban design. We did receive some initial feedback from the design review staff during the pre-application process. So we've worked to kind of accommodate some of those code requirements for the articulation or modulation of the facade, as well as looking at different materials. Again, the developer of this project does very high quality projects. He doesn't, it's a insulated concrete form construction. So not only is it very high quality, but it is very long lasting. Essentially, there's no sound transmission from unit to unit, and the buildings last a very long time. He uses very highly efficient HVAC and, you know, other mechanical systems on this as well. So in terms of high quality, I don't know if you could get much higher quality for this. In terms of the setback, so on the north, as was discussed, is a parking lot. This property actually used to be a residential use prior to becoming vacant. So the property to the south, that commercial building, is also set back 5 feet. So there will be essentially 12.5 feet from building wall to building wall with, maybe a 5-foot encroachment or 5.5-foot encroachment of that balcony into our setback, which still provides up to 7 feet, if not more, from the building, the existing commercial building to the south to the edge of the balcony, coupled with extensive landscaping. And there's limited windows on that north side of that commercial building. The uses are, as was discussed, I think there is a massage parlor there. There's also a recording studio that operates typically later in the evenings. I actually know one of the owners of that. The alley is ACHD responsibility. We are dedicating additional right-of-way. We have to pave that additional right-of-way. There's also a parking lot associated with the Hoppy building directly to the west that you could essentially make a straight shot from Vista through their parking lot and into this parking area associated with this, which there is 16 parking spaces. Let's see. There will be an HOA, so if there is any issues with the alley maintenance or clearing of the alley or access into the parking area, that's going to be addressed by an HOA. There will be a fee collected for maintenance and upkeep. The building, while it is 45 feet to the peak, that roof is set back, again, with that 4th story being a little bit set back from the front and rear. That's to the peak of that roof. So we're probably 2.5 to 3 feet below that to the midline of that sloped roof. If this was to remain commercial zoning, there could be a 45-foot tall building built there right now with 0-foot setbacks that's allowed in the C2 zone. So because this is a residential structure, it's set further back. It has a lot more residential treatment to it. We feel it's very appropriate for this area, especially because of the higher intensity uses along Vista and Overland. The existing single family that does exist along Robert Street is in a light office district, actually, not a residential zone. And while we can't guess at how the other lots along this street are going to develop, I would assume it will be a mix of residential and commercial buildings in the future. In terms of rentals, the developer is going to place these for sale. He may end up restricting what can be rented out or not with the CC&Rs. There will be CC&Rs because there's an HOA, but typically you can't restrict if someone wants to rent out the property that they buy. A lot of single family residential that's built right now is purchased by investment, people from out of state or in state. Whether or not that's it's not a student housing project and it's not an apartment project. I guess that's what it boils down to. And again, we're just really excited about the project. Look forward to bringing it to Boise. And with that, I'd stand for more questions.
Okay, thank you, Ben. I think with that, we will go ahead and bring this item back before the commission. 2 items in front of us right now, CR 20-11, CVA 20-34. What is the commission's pleasure?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Finn.
Yeah, Brock, go for it.
I recommend approval of CAR 20-11 and let me see. Sorry, I actually believe it's and move for CBA 20-34 along with the recommended and standard conditions of approval.
Second.
Got a motion for approval of CAR 20-11 and CVA 20-34. Any discussion on the item?
Good Chair.
Commissioner Finfrock.
So just kind of a ticker of things. The variance to encroach into the side setbacks shouldn't be an issue because of the adjacent properties. They're mostly commercial. The site is mixed use on the land map, which allows for the RO zone and the rezone. The applicant is not requesting a parking reduction, so parking is sufficient. And I think that density is appropriate because of its location near the transit and the activity center. So I think that this application is a good one for this area. And like they said, there's been some high quality urban design that's gone into this site. And I think they've done a good job at trying to meet Blueprint Boise's goals.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Stevens.
I thank Commissioner Finfrock. I agree with everything she said. I want to add a few other things because I'm only going to have a couple more opportunities to get on my soapbox about this. So I just want to restate how important it is to have rentals in our market. And I strongly urge the developer not to encourage their HOA to implement CCNRs that would restrict that. It's critically important that we have vibrant neighborhoods that include both renters as well as owners. It's how we build our neighborhoods. It's how we make them vibrant. And it's how we build our city. And we welcome every kind of person, every income person, every race, everybody. We've all been renters. I can't imagine there's anybody on this call who wasn't a renter at some point in their life. And if you were, well, then you are a very unique human being. So I just want to get on my soapbox about that. I agree with everything Commissioner Finfrock said. I also think that this is a very creative solution with regard to parking in this area. And I just want to make a point that there was never a statement that this was going to be affordable housing. So I don't want anybody on the call and in the public and on the record to think that any of the commissioners think that this is an affordable housing project. I think when that statement gets made, or when the language gets used, oftentimes people mean that there are going to be a range of options in the city. And these are 1-bedroom units, which means they will sell for less, presumably, than, you know, a single family home on a 1/4 acre. And so that is more affordable for some people than a family of 4 who wants to buy a single family home on acreage inside the city. So, you know, I think it's very important that we have a mix of stock and that we have a mix of people in our city to create vibrant neighborhoods. So I strongly support the project. I think it's very creative. I think it is totally appropriate, if not perfect, for this location. And I thank Mr. Semple and his client for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevens.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Moore.
I also wanted to add onto that and speak on the height requirements and the height restrictions on this. You know, in the LO zone, the C2 zone, the max height is 45 feet. And then in the R1C zone, which is most of that single family housing, the max height is 35 feet. So it's proposed as 45 feet as the max height that is actually set back as well. So it fits in the zone guidelines in terms of dimensions, and especially because it has been limited to height as well. I think it fits well for density. And
Thank you, Commissioner Moore. Any other comments from the commission? Okay, I'm going to chime in real quick. I fully support the project as well. I think all the comments from my fellow commissioners hit the nail on the head. I think it's a great fit for this neighborhood, a great fit for the area, and to continue to see increased revitalization of that neighborhood. So I think it's a win all the way around. It meets the DA. The applicant is in agreement with the conditions in the report. And then our colleagues in DR will also get a chance to take a look at it and see and further refine the project through the design review process. I understand the concerns that were brought forward during the public testimony, but I think that in this area, more density is going to be needed as we move further down the road and more people continue to move here. So I think, again, with this being a neighborhood activity center, this is a great fit for the area. So with that, we have a motion to recommend approval to City Council of CAR 20-11 and a motion for approval of CVA 20-34. Will the clerk please call the vote?
Stead,
Aye.
Schaefer,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Stevens,
Aye.
Finfrock,
Aye.
Bratnover.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. That concludes our business for this evening. We are adjourned.
Thank you, Bob. Take care, guys.
Thanks, gang. See you.
Thank you.